Hey, welcome everyone to an early edition of Flyer and Ice. Please, before we get into the show, check us out on YouTube, subscribe to the Heat Ratio Sport Network. That's who we're powered by. Like, subscribe to us, to all socials. We're everywhere. We're on all podcasts. We're everywhere. So today we have a very special show. Today's show is episode 25, and we have a tradition since episode 16 to name a show after a player. I'm going to go Peter Zezel, the Peter Zezel episode. Sorry that I'm not honoring Sean Podine, but I'm going to go Peter Zezel. So with me today is Nicky the Scout Tosti and our very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, he was the longest tenured athlete during his time in Philadelphia, Mr. Chris Therien, number 6. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Guys, it's a pleasure to be here. I know we've been going back and forth for a few months trying to get on, and I'm really, really happy to be on with you guys. You do a great job, and looking forward to a little Q&A with you guys.
No, we appreciate that. Now, let's get right to it. Let's talk about your current venture with Limitless Recovery, how that started, and just tell us all about it. And ladies and gentlemen, all the information about Limitless Recovery is scrolling at the bottom in case you know people that need help, and Chris will get into that right now.
Yeah, you know what, really, guys, I'll tell you when I was, as my story went, and there was a great article in the Philadelphia Inquirer where it all came out. Sam Carchidi put it out, I believe it was February, and we'd spent some hours together just talking. Really, I'd actually been approached last December by Triumph Books before I'd even mentioned my history of addiction. If I'd be interested in sharing some of my stories. Some of the guys had said, I'd make for an interesting book read because I was here a long time, and I saw a lot of the stuff that went on in the 90s with some of the, the greatest Flyers teams, I think, that have ever been assembled in the city of Philadelphia that didn't win. So they thought it would be compelling to get a lot of those stories for a regional read for a lot of the Flyers fans. And in the same process, it all started last August when I got fired by the Flyers and by NBC for whatever reason. I mean, changes are made and they move on from them. But that was not Ed Snyder's Flyers. Anybody running that organization has no ties to Ed Snyder and the greatness that he brought to this organization for years. Same with NBC. These people are hacks. For the most part, and they really truly don't know, I think, a lot of the good things that they've had through there. So I realized when that was done that, what I said during my tenure, I was doing both TV with the Flyers down between the ice level, and then when I was doing pre and post, I had wanted to do something else. And going back, tracing back into my history, I had an addiction to alcohol at the end of my career, specifically probably the last 2 or 3 years, and it really decimated my career in terms of my playing ability. My last year only, I can safely say the prior years I was pretty good to go and an honorable player and came out hard. But my last year I was really addicted to alcohol, and I knew that and so many things had happened in 2006. My career had come to an end. My sister had suddenly had died, and it's not so much different than when I reading the papers earlier today with Jimmy Hayes, brother of Kevin Hayes. It was almost eerily similar. She had a heart ailment that she was born with, something that we never would have looked at. And so my life was kind of changed. I was, we buried my sister, eulogized her, and 2 weeks later I was in rehab, my first ever trip to an alcohol addiction. And, it didn't get any lower than my life at that time. So, I'd gone through the journey of it, and having gotten a couple years after that, I'd worked my way through the Flyers a little bit. I'd always been a guy with I felt like a personality that was willing to talk, and I had a lot of passion still about the game of hockey. So I got involved in my first pre and post game at NBC. I mean, that's when they had some great characters that worked at Comcast at the time, really, which is a good company, and the Flyers were so supportive to have me come in and at least to follow suit of a long playing career. However, whatever happened at the end, I'd still been here 12 years and still had played the most games as a defenseman at that point, and still do. Provorov will beat it someday, or somebody will, but that's okay. But I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew that I never forgotten the pain that I was in at that time in my life and how it affected me. And after, like I said, after having bounced out from about 2006 to 2008, I decided to test the waters again to see if I maybe could ever be a normal drinker. And I found out over time that I never went back to the levels I was at before, of being so out of control. But I found out pretty quickly that I was never going to be able to enjoy what a normal person can enjoy when it comes to alcohol. It took me down a bad path, and that happens to a lot of people. It's a matter of accepting that and understanding it. So February 7th, 2011, I put down the drink for the last time in my life. I had a young family, I had young kids, and that was not the person I wanted to be. And I didn't want to be betray my oath as a father to give them the very best that I could. And it's hard enough being a parent in this world without having to mix, an alcohol in it, where you're definitely not the best version of yourself. Lots of times as a parent, we're not the best version of ourselves anyway, because parenting is that hard. So, but I did. I've got 10 and a half, almost pushing 11 years now of full sobriety. My daughters have gone on to have incredible success. All three are Division I scholarship athletes. I don't say that. It's not a financial thing for me. I looked at it as they didn't have to worry about a drunk father walking in the gym like that kid in Hoosiers, right? Where he was embarrassed about their young basketball players that had gone on to college D1. And I never wanted that. I always resonated thinking of Dennis Hopper in that movie and how embarrassing that was for the kid. And, those are little things, those are made in movies, but they hit home, they hit reality. And so that's what my life was. And I realized, I don't want to be a loser. I don't want to be this guy. I don't want to be, this is not who I was put on earth to be. I've always believed there was something, a higher calling for me, more so than hockey. And last year, after, like I said, I was fired by the Flyers and NBC, I decided to take a trip into the unknown. And that was to reveal my story, let people know that, hey, this happened to me. I know I'm not a big deal. I'm not a movie star. I'm not the world's most famous celebrity. I always looked at myself as a very ordinary person that was lucky to have had extraordinary events happen to me in my life that shaped me. And that was specifically playing for the Philadelphia Flyers in an area where I was at a long time, where people knew who I was. They still know who I was. But I wanted to give back to this city because I'd seen the pain that other people were in. I was in it at the same time. And so I got a friend of mine that I went to football games with, Paul Cates. He's a great guy. We talked. He said, listen, if you're doing a project in this city that involves passion, I'd love to be a part of it. So he ponied up. We got together. We bought an existing business. We retained one of our other partners, Dom Chavon, who does our operations. And we have slowly but surely worked our way down the path. We're only 8 months in. Like any other place, we treat it like a startup. And there's been some hiccups along the way, but there's been a lot of, I think in terms of the people that we've been able to reach out to and the response that we've gotten to my story, alike letting people know, here's who I am. And I'm not ashamed to say it anymore. I'm not afraid to say it. In fact, by me saying it, I'm letting the next person know that it's okay for you to say it too, because it's not that big a deal. Erase the stigma. Things happen. Shit happens to people in life, and we have to pick ourselves up off the ground. We have to move forward. We can't sit back and cry and whine about it, because the only ones who are going to make a real, truly positive influence in our own lives are ourselves and the good deeds and the good intentions that we move forward with. So that's where it came to light for me. It's been probably the greatest, again, at the end of the day, maybe hockey down the road, people remember me in 30 years, but if they don't, I want this to certainly be my lasting legacy on the city of Philadelphia. This has been my home. This is my home for a long time now. And because I've been here for so very long, I always feel like the people now, and I walk around, whether it's a Wawa or a bowling alley, a football game, I'm received very well by the people here in the city, and I owe them a lot. I've been here a long time, and I'm a loyal person like that. And the city of Philadelphia has been that good to me that if there's a little slice I can give back to it, I feel that this is what it is.
Well, it's truly an amazing story, and I did read that article, and I don't know, I wrote you a pretty impassioned letter.
Yeah,
it moved me. I mean, it didn't, like you said, it wasn't because you were Chris Therien. It was just, you could have been John Smith. It was just a letter that, an article that moved me, and I just wanted to reach out and thank you, and that kind of stuff. And real fast, ladies and gentlemen, Chris is an amazing parent. I survived the early stages of COVID by watching his driveway basketball brawls. Those were absolutely amazing. I wanted to thank you for posting them. Those your kids playing basketball, throwing elbows, the intensity. I now know why they're Division I basketball players. And your son is on his way too.
I have to tell you guys, there's one. So more people are like, "Hey, Bundy, are you guys going to be putting any more of those videos out?" Right? That they were really competing. And so the last one I went out. I mean, I'm not kidding, guys. These are girls, right? Teenagers. I'd never heard so many F-bombs, and they tossed the ball out. It was nasty, a real street ball. And I said, "Well, I'm not in this one," but I couldn't post that one, and I actually ended up hurling a couple at him after for throwing the F-bomb in there a couple too many times that I couldn't post it for other kids to see it. So anyway, it's all good though, but thank you.
No, you're welcome. And before Nick starts us off, again, please check the bottom of our screen. If you or anyone you know is suffering from any addiction, please reach out to Limitless Recovery Centers, and Chris will be in touch with you.
Yeah.
It's really important. Please do not ignore friends and family that are going through problems.
Yeah.
Nick.
Chris, that was so incredibly inspiring, man. Your energy and your positivity is infectious, and I hope and I know you're touching a lot of people through this organization, and we're honored to have you on the show today, man. It's so cool.
Thank you.
It's great. So, all right, let's get started from I guess from the beginning with you. Tell us about your draft experience. What were your initial thoughts about joining the Flyers after your draft?
Yeah, I mean, I had a little different. I kind of have to back up a little bit going to that. As a teenager, and we were talking a little bit beforehand. But as I said, I coached South Jersey hockey down here. It was Comcast and became Virtua, and I think it's like Flyers Elite now. And because of COVID, I pushed my son back a little bit, where he's playing football. He's a really big kid for 14. He's like 6'3", 230. So we're gonna just see how that goes a little bit at Cherokee this year. He's a freshman. But going back to like my, before, leading up to the draft, at 14 years old, I quit hockey for a year. People are like, "How did you quit hockey at 14 and then go on to do what you did?" And I said, I kind of joke. I said, either you got it or you don't, right? So, but at the end of the day, it's kind of true. I don't think that's ever really changed over the course of time. So I ended up at 14. The only reason I ever stayed in hockey was my dad believed enough in me to say, you know what, I've seen something in this kid, and I'm willing to get him out of this area, which was, it's tough. I mean, minor hockey is like we were talking. I mean, it's, you got parents of 12-year-olds that are certain their kids are going to be starting in the NHL the next day. I look at them like, I know like Guy Gaudreau's here, Johnny played here, it makes for the amazing little story, right? The little tiny guy who somehow made it and has had an unbelievably great career getting points and stuff. But so there's always like the hope and dream. It's no different than anyone else having that type of vision when you're a kid, and I love it. But yeah, I packed it in for an entire year. I skied. And then I went to Northwood Prep School for 3 years at 15. This is an era where there's no social media. And I had two great friends at home. I'd say, guys, I went from 5'9" to like 6'4". No one ever saw that coming. I got bigger, faster.
Up in Lake Placid, right?
Northwood. I went to Lake Placid. It ended up being, it was, people say, oh, I went to a U.S. high school. Yeah, well, U.S. high school, it had turned out lots of NHLers over time. It was a factory. It really was. It was no joke. Like, we would have beaten major A teams in Canada my last year. We would have pounded probably 3 or 4 of them. We had Craig Conroy was on that team. He played over 1,000 games. I mean, and in myself, I mean, we were pretty, at the end of the day, we had pretty good NHL players that went on from there. But so I got drafted. I told people, I said, I think I'm going to get drafted. And they're like, how the, you quit hockey? You've disappeared for 3 years. No, there's no social media, right, that tells the story. So summer of 1990, Vancouver comes, and the Flyers have 7 first-round picks. And I got picked, like they were starting to ring them off like one name after another. And 47th pick, the Philadelphia Flyers select Chris Therien. And they had another one right after me. Michael Renberg went 42nd. It was a hell of a draft. If you actually go back in time to look at the names off that 1990 draft, it's without question one of the greatest drafts in the history of the league. If you look at the first round, even going deep into the third round, 4th, 5th round, there's guys that made it and played a long, long time. So that was good. But yeah, when I got drafted by the Flyers, it was like, wow, you don't know what's going to happen, right? Someone's just going to call your name up. But it's funny, as a kid, I had a picture. I think it's probably on one of my Facebook pages somewhere. It was me and my sister, and I had a Flyer shirt on, and I was a diehard Montreal Canadian fan because I was from the East End of Ottawa, and that's who we rooted for. The West End rooted for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I somehow had this Flyer jersey on when I was probably 8 years old, maybe 8 or 9 years old. With a hockey stick in the basement. So I guess if there's a destiny, it was predetermined at a far earlier date than when I went on to make it. From there, just quickly, I went to Providence College from Northwood. It was a different time. You didn't go right to the pros. Now I might have done a year and then maybe turn pro, because guys are starting to turn or play in the NHL at a younger age now. But I went for 3 years to Providence. Probably should have left after my second, but my dad wanted me to play in the Olympics. I kind of wanted to tour the world as well. In 1994, I represented Canada in the Olympics at Lillehammer. And right after that, I signed with the Flyers. They were missing the playoffs. They only had a handful of games left. And I went to Hershey at the end of that year. Lockout happened the next year. I made the team in training camp, which was my goal. I went in there and I said, I want to make this team. I don't want to, I felt like I did enough time in college. I played in the minors or the Olympic schedule for a year, which was like the minors in a lot of ways. And I just felt like I was ready. Had a battle with Eric Lindros in my first training camp. And I knew that if I won that battle, I knew that I was probably the only guy on the ice at that time that could actually handle him. And that's what happened. That really set the tone. And I actually go back. I think that's what happened. Bob Clark said, there's no one else that we have that could handle Eric Lindros. So why wouldn't we have a guy like that on our team? And I think he said it was like a home run for us. But I was really proud to be here in Philadelphia. I immediately loved the area, the people. You could tell it was a different type of sports town. And it's funny, when I look back at Philadelphia, just for the people, from the standpoint of what their level of care for their sports, is beyond what anybody else is. Like, I've been to all these other cities. I've spent days and days, maybe weeks in every other sports city from my travels over the year. And there's nobody, and there's no fan base like the ones in Philadelphia. So when I look back at it now, from a player, a broadcaster, a podcaster, talking to guys like yourselves that have passion about sports, that's what resonates with me. And that's why I feel like I'm the luckiest athlete on the planet to have had this opportunity to play as long as I did in this amazing sports town.
Wow, that's good stuff.
And it really is.
It's true. And I say, like, I'm not throwing it out. If this was like Buffalo, I'd be like, wow, like, I got stuck in a hellhole. Like, it's Buffalo. I'm not, no offense to the people of Buffalo. The town's a dump. I would have hated to play there. Philadelphia is a blue collar town too, but there's something, listen, and I know the Bills have the Bills Mafia and they love their team, but I didn't like the look of it. I love Philadelphia for all it was. And I especially loved it for the fact that, like, I loved that they threw snowballs at Santa Claus when I heard that story. Like, I thought that was awesome. I know some people, like, it's a little mean. It resonated with me. And I felt the ire of the fans too. Don't get me wrong. Like I said long ago, if you played in Philadelphia and you have not been booed by the fans, then you really didn't play in Philadelphia. And I've been booed here and I've been cheered here.
Well, you've been mostly cheered, and I'd imagine a lot of that has to do with the fact that you were a number one paired defenseman with one of the greatest defensemen in Flyers history, Eric Desjardins. Can you please share what it was like playing beside him all those years?
Well, let me tell you, first of all, the importance of Eric. So we had two Erics that were great Eric players when I played here, right? And this is a fact that no player would disagree with. If number 37, if we had a choice to who we'd rather have out of the lineup for a week, number 37 Eric or number 88 Eric, we would keep the 37 in the lineup and put the 88 out. That's how important this guy was to the team. I didn't play with him till about my third year in, because the first year was a half year. And I remember Terry Murray, they called me in. He said, we want you to play with Desjardins, but you haven't stepped it up. Like, your game, you haven't gotten better from last year. You're just playing hockey. And I remember what happened my second year was my third year. He started scratching me about mid-season. It was my third year as a contract year. It was the most rude awakening I'd ever gotten. And I think that every single player needed to go through what I went through, because it made me who I was the rest of my career. I never complained. I worked my ass off every day. I stayed positive. And I got in probably the most incredible shape that I was in through the two assistant coaches. Like, they didn't give up on me. And the coaches said, we're going to push this guy because we think there's a lot more there. And finally, when I came back, I was playing really well for 3 or 4 games. I can't remember who it was with. It might have been with Shel Samuelson again. And I remember one next day, they had the lines out, and he said, you're out with Desjardins today. And that started a 10-year relationship that never stopped. And I tell you what, we had some moments together. Like, the worst part for anybody on those teams was the fact that we can't look at the city and say, we won a Stanley Cup. Because those teams should have won Stanley Cups repeatedly, whether it was the lack of great goaltending, the drama that we went through some playoff series. That team and those teams, and I'm writing a book about it right now as we speak, were the best Flyers teams, I think, in the history of the franchise that never won a thing. And they were certainly loaded with talent, chemistry. We had characters. And I think, it shows you how very, very difficult it is to win a Stanley Cup, to get there all the way, because one team wins at the end of the day, right? Take the last 10 teams. If you go back in time, back to 2010 when the Blackhawks beat the Flyers, there's a couple teams with multiple Stanley Cups in that 11-year span, right? So what that ends up being like 4 or 5 teams that won Stanley Cups. It's really, really hard. But it was I think you ask anybody, and even the alumni game this year, I look at it, that would probably be most guys' biggest regrets. The players that played in those teams was we were just too good that we should not have won a Stanley Cup. But of course, the biggest letdown, I think, in terms of playoff losses would have been 2000. That was an unbelievable team to have had a 3-1 lead, and the collapse that ensued after that. We were beating Dallas that year. There was no stopping us. We were on a mission to prove a lot of things. And that, to me, though, of all, it wasn't even the Detroit in 97. It was losing in 2000 in the semis to the Devils, because it never should have happened.
You know what? You're a psychic, because you just addressed a future question, which I will, I guess, tweak a little bit now. but no, that's good. Real quick, I wanted to mention or ask you this question, and I'm probably wrong. When you first came up, I remember going to an exhibition game. Was Gordon Murphy? Did he come up around the same time as you?
He was before me.
Okay.
Yeah, I never really. He was only here as a coach when I was doing TV. I didn't really know him as a player.
Okay. All right. For some reason, I visualize you guys on the ice together.
Yeah. Well, no.
That was a man. Those to be able to play on the caliber of team that you played on in those, that mid to late 90s up into the 2000s. I mean, you really just had we're so fortunate to be on such quality hockey teams. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Who you still have any close friends from those playing years, and do you stay in touch with some of the core guys?
Absolutely. I mean, me and John LeClaire were great friends. We were roommates for 10 years. I could sit here for 12 hours telling you me and John stories, guys, but we'd probably get locked up by the time I was done telling them. We ran pretty hard together. He was a great teammate, one hell of a hockey player, always ready to go. There was a lot of guys over my time here, like Desjardins, Shel Samuelson, I still keep in touch with. A lot of guys lived locally. He came a little bit later, but Keith Primo, Donald Brashear. There's a lot of guys that lived out here. Brian Boucher, of course, used to live right next door to me all the time for a few years. You're naming
all the players that had kids that played. My son played with Caden and Cal LeClaire and, all the people that you're talking about. Matthias Samuelson. Yeah. Everybody you just named is like in my head, like, oh my God, we see him at the rink all the time.
Yeah.
And his kids and Hatcher was coaching Comcast at the time when my son was coming up through the U system. That's funny that you named all those names. It was just
and we all had kids like the same age, right? So that's probably what it is too. Most athletes, you say like guys that go to the rink, we're all fathers too. Like, the kids are playing. So you leave the rink, the kids are, playing street hockey together somewhere. It's no different than anywhere else, especially hockey players, because I think we leave the building and we still have the reputation, and I can attest to it, of just being the most regular guys. Like, I'll leave practice and go to a Wawa and get a hoagie after. That's the kind of guy I was, So, and I think that's just a hockey player thing. I don't think that's different anywhere. I don't think.
And another thing I wanted to reference, when you were talking about how you were in the best shape of your life, weren't you renowned for always winning the bike trials in Avalon?
I was one of those guys where, I did. We won it one year. It was me, Rick Tocchet, and Chris McAllister. We won it so bad one year that we were so far in front of everybody, the cop told me to take a left because he didn't think it was possible that we'd be. And so I took a wrong corner, and we lost the thing because the guy gave us the wrong direction. We were ahead by like 19 minutes. And I tried to plead with Jim McCrossin, who had it. I said, we won. He's like, I know, but you didn't finish the line. I said, you gave us the wrong way to go. But I was a big bike rider. That was my thing. And in the summertime, and we had the option of coming in and doing the run or the ride. But yeah, I don't know what a lot of that stuff, guys, is I think it's changed. They've kind of come a long way with their conditioning. But that's what we did. We rode the bike, we ran, we lifted weights, and as soon as training camp came, we were off to the rodeo and ready to go for another season.
All right, so we'll get this one out of the way early. You referenced Eric. You referenced number 88, how if it was up to you between the two Erics, he'd be the one that would sit. Yeah, obviously, that's, between just the two Erics, not your teammates in general. But what was it like in the early stages of being his teammate to the ridiculous soap opera in 2000?
Yeah, and I think it's a fair question. First of all, I think to know like what. When I came in here, Eric Lindros, when I came in 94 season, right, training camp. I mean, he was the biggest name in the league at the time, right? He was what everybody wanted to see. He was a revelation. He was this physical power that could score, had the soft hand, all the things we knew about, right? The physicality. He was a package, and he was considered at that time a generational superstar, right? Generational superstars never lose. Go back in the history of hockey. Look at every single generational superstar and look at how many Stanley Cups they have. And that's the only way you can gauge it, right? Like if you go to the NBA, you got Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, LeBron. They're all generational players. They all came in. You go to the NHL, go right back to the 50s. Gordie Howe, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Mario Lemieux. Messier's not even there. Lemieux's a generational talent. Eric Lindros, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't call him that guy.
No,
I wouldn't say that. He wasn't the first overall pick.
Right.
He wasn't that guy that absolutely. Don't forget, Jágr only won 2 Stanley Cups with Lemieux.
Right.
That's not taking anything away from him at all. Jágr's obviously a dynamo of a hockey player, but he was not considered the guy that was going to piggyback a team to a Stanley Cup.
Right.
He never did on his own, but neither did Eric. When I came in, I'm not kidding you, and there's guys that would tell you this too. You could get caught watching him on the bench some nights, like as a player, where you're just like, holy Jesus. Like the guy was a freak, right? He would just run 3 guys over, take the puck, make a play to the net, or just make an unbelievable play. And the whole building was like just spellbound. I think the first 2 years up until the Stanley Cup Finals, I think was the best that Eric had ever offered for this city in terms of his play on the ice. I believe that. I never got better after that. That's where the Terry Murray choking incident and all the things started to kind of collapse at that time. And I think when you end up, and you know what, you said it a little bit, and I'm not a guy that likes to deter or to take shots at former teammates, but when a soap opera ensues off the ice, I can assure you the soap opera will ensue on the ice as well. 2000, I would say, would be a year where if you could take 22 guys that were driving in one singular direction, in spite of, that would be that team. And that's why that team was going to win the Stanley Cup in 2000. Everything else, you're right. Everything else ended up being a soap opera. You can't run around in the league that time, when you're running guys over at 12 and 13, to think you're going to run guys over at 23 and 24 in the best men's league in the world. You can't skate with your head down through the middle. And injuries happen, unfortunately. Eric definitely got bit by the injury bug. There's no doubt about that, and that affected him as well. It was just a lot of the garbage, I think, that went on the side from both sides, the Flyers and Eric's side as well. But there were times like going after a trainer. Those aren't things that we do as athletes. We don't accuse a medical trainer of, malpractice and dealing with soap opera sheet kind of things that nobody really wants to deal with in a men's locker room.
Well, let's build on that before I get to next question. What was a consensus in the locker room? The whole part of that soap opera was, should he play in the playoffs when he's ready, or should he not play in the playoffs? And he played pretty damn well when he dressed. But what did the locker room want, truthfully?
No, we didn't want him back.
Okay.
No, there's no question. I think guys could figure that out. No, we did not want him back in the lineup. There was an understanding that, there's a deeper story I'll save for down the road, but there was one night where, we were talking, and it was in that series. I remember Rick talking, saying to guys, like, who do you want where we're at right now? We were rolling along, right? You have to remember we were talking. I think when we had a team conversation about it, the census was, do you want him on your fourth line or do you want Peter White on your fourth line? Well, guys like Peter White. He fit in, like he was one of the guys, so that's like the weird part is getting that through, he played 5 minutes a night. He killed penalties. He's part of the group, he was part of the Pittsburgh, we took Pittsburgh down 0-2 at home, of course we know the story, right? The 5 overtime game. So there was things like that, but I think ultimately we wanted to use his talent, but I don't think it was worth, the end result was terrible, and I don't think there's anywhere else you could point the blame to. There isn't.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nick? Another name, Peter White. That Jody Clark and Peter White's son Peter went up through the ranks with playing against them as well. Great people, by the way.
Yeah. But you know what? The one thing too, guys, like one of the things that Eric, he had injuries. That is true. Like he did have a lot of injuries late, especially head injuries. But I just felt like at that point, I think it was almost, we were so deep in the playoffs. We were so close and we were so united as a group. To have gone through, we went through in Pittsburgh, the 5 overtime game, taking a 3-1 lead on a team I don't know if we believed we could beat was the Devils. They were always our thorn in our side.
Yes.
If you asked me, what we thought. I think that's what, I don't know where else to point the blame. Bush was playing well. For some reason, those last 2 or 3 games, our best players were not our best players. And something clearly affected them.
Who was your favorite coach, and who was your least favorite coach to play for?
Well, my least favorite coach was Ken Hitchcock. He was just miserable about everything in life. He's like the kind of guy when he leaves the rink, like he'd go home and be like, all right, great, I bitched at everybody all day. Now what am I going to do now? Roger Nielsen and Craig Ramsey were unbelievable guys. They got it. Like they understood, like, you're going to lose games some nights where you probably shouldn't have lost. Some nights you're going to play like crap, but we trust you and we know that most nights you guys are going to be great. Like whoever it is. He understood that that's the way the team went. They were really good people, really good hockey people. I didn't have many coaches I didn't like. Even like Billy Barber. I liked Billy. He was a good guy. Like he was like an all-in type of guy. He was a throwback coach, but I liked him as a person. Terry Murray, I liked Terry as a person. I loved Wayne Cashman. Cash was just like, he still thought that if you got hit wrong, you should go like take your stick and spear a guy right in the mouth. And it was a little bit past him. And he always felt like, I remember he told Bob Clark that year, like, I'd like to be an assistant coach. I don't like being a head coach. So, all right, well, we'll make you an assistant coach again. So there he went, and Roger came in. But I played with a lot of them. Hitch was the kind of guy where he just would wear you out. It just never stopped. You could be playing great, and he'd be yelling at you at the end of the bench, and you'd have like 3 guys telling him, like, "Shut up, fatso," and it would just take away. It would just distract the whole bench. And off days, like he would break down a win to a point where you couldn't even pay attention to the video by the end of it because there's too many games coming at you. And if you're at a point now where you're starting to like critique wins in an 82 game season, well, it's going to be a really long year.
Yeah, it sounds like the stereotypical the coach has lost his voice kind of a thing. Enough is enough. You hear the same message over and over and over again. Who's paying attention anymore?
Right.
I want to build on that real fast. So Nick, I'm going to skip my next question because Chris has covered it already. So I kind of have a philosophy that there's 3 kind of coaches. You got your player coach, the militaristic coach that you just referenced, and the guy that's somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
The slash and burn coaches are the Mike Keenans, the Hitchcocks, I guess Laviolette to some extent, Tortorellas of the world. Do you agree with that? Do you see that a lot? And what kind of, obviously a general manager has to say, okay, listen, this team failed. The coach was way too soft. We got to go in a different direction. What's your perspective on how does the manager need to find a coach to suit the players, or do you have to change the culture of a team by going after a different genre of coach?
It's a great question. Yeah, I always think it's funny. I used to talk to Hitch a lot about coaching and stuff too, even though we didn't always get along as player coach. But as I got later in my career, I remember talking to him a little bit as a coaching thing. And he would always say there was always different ways you had to coach based on your personnel, right? Like if you had more of a veteran team. There was a theory in Dallas. I'll give you this one with Hitchcock. There was this theory that went on for years that he purposely made the team hate him to kind of revolt against him and play hard in spite of him. Almost like the situation here in Philadelphia with 88, but no one really, I don't think anybody hated Eric. We were disappointed maybe with how things were shaking up off the ice. I don't think anyone hated him. Hitch was the kind of guy though, where he could do things to you. I remember we were walking out of a rink one night in Colorado, and Mike Keane was there. Of course, he played for Hitch in Dallas, and we're walking out after, and Hitch was coaching the Flyers, and Keener says, "Hey, what's up, guys? Does everybody hate Hitch yet?" right in front of Hitch, and we were laughing. I'm thinking, "Geez, yeah, we do, we really do." And so it was really funny though. But so he would go to the extreme on it, and then there were other guys I think Billy Barber tried to be more of a middle of the road type of guy. And then you had Roger and Ramsey were more the player kind of coaches, right? With Terry Murray a little bit also. Really good with veterans. He was not great with younger players. But I look at it, if I didn't have Terry Murray as my coach, I might not have made it past my third year. So I'm really grateful that he was hard on me and he coached me hard. He did. He didn't make it easy on me. And today, when I look back at it, I'm really, really thankful for that somebody didn't give up on me, put me through the ringer, sat me out, made me stew in it, but I responded the way that they wanted. And after that, I probably never missed another game again until Hitch came around.
All right, Nick. Again, we're skipping my next question. It's been addressed.
Yeah. So I guess I'll jump to what happened, or what your thoughts were and your feelings were when you got the call that you were traded to Dallas. What was? I mean, based off everything you just said about your love for this city and your admiration and loving it here and being the longevity you had here. What was that like? I mean, was it really that devastating?
Well, I knew my contract was coming to an end at the end of the year. And so we also knew there was a real possibility that this lockout could be a real thing. So I'm thinking, well, first of all, at that point, I'd hated Hitchcock so much that I was like, thank God. I was done with him. And, that's an interesting storyline in itself, that whole year, because, I ended up coming back after that 2 years later. And, ironically, that year, the Flyers had a great team. 2004, I wasn't there. And, again, when you get to the semifinals that far and that deep with that kind of team, you probably want to get back a couple of those defensemen maybe you traded at the deadline, like myself and Eric Weinrich, instead of having to play Sammy Kapanen on defense. I was still a shutdown defenseman. Ed Snyder, I was told, Clark told me, he goes, Snyder didn't want to put on any more salary. We got Malakoff. We knew you were miserable. We had to lose some salary with it as well. I talked to Clarkie about that 2 years later. He's like, it was, we loved our team, but, you didn't know we'd have the injuries we ended up having. That's why I always say, right, sometimes you need 10 defensemen to win a Stanley Cup, especially then. Now you probably use 7. There's not quite as physical, but yeah, that's what happened. They had little Sammy Kapanen was playing defense against Vinny Lecavalier and Brad Richards and those guys, and those guys were my assignment players. I still would have been able to handle a bigger body at that stage in my career. And I was disappointed, I guess, from the standpoint that the Flyers had a very good run. I didn't want them to win that year. If they won the next year, no problem. I didn't want to be here 11 years and have the Flyers go win. I know the fans will be like, well, too bad, but that's the way I felt. I'm just being honest with you.
It's human nature.
I don't think anybody could fault me for that. Weinrich called me the same thing. He was here for 4 years. I don't know if I want these guys to win. So really hard to cheer for him. But I knew if they beat Tampa that they were going to beat Calgary as long as their defense came back together. I don't know if that was going to happen. I think Desjardins was close, and Marcus Ragnarsson as well. But
that's the key guy. I wanted to get your opinion on him. He was terrific, steady. He was a steady guy, and then he got hurt. It was the final straw, I believe.
It was, and he was just a grinder. Like, he was a good, hard, tough Swede. You know, he competed hard. He was like a smaller shell or Ulf Samuelsson in a lot of ways. But that was an excellent Flyer team. Even at the end, even without the guys they traded, they just got hurt.
Yes,
and it did cost the city a Stanley Cup. Not getting rid of me and Weinrich, just the fact that they had injuries at the time,
right,
and decimated them on defense. So
right.
I guess it's my turn again. Sorry.
Fire away, guys.
Yeah. So our crew, and we talked about this a little bit at pre-show. We all believe you are an amazing analyst. We loved you on the ice. We loved you pre and post game show. And I don't believe in disparaging anyone on this show, so I won't talk about the current person in your role, but it's mind-boggling. However, you turned it into a silver lining, as you referenced with your limitless recovery venture. However, what was it like transitioning, like you said, from the ice into that broadcasting position?
Yeah, you know what? I started on pregame and I kind of worked my way up. Radio happened pretty quickly. I think Brian Propp had been doing it, and I was getting in. And you know, I think anything like broadcasting, like being a player sometimes or a coach, it's who likes you. And I was lucky enough to have had guys like Peter Luco, who was the best boss I could have had. Him and Sean Tilger. I mean, those guys were unbelievable under Ed Snyder. I mean, that was when an organization was run the way the fans of this city would want to know it was being run. They were incredible people, and they cared about alumni. I mean, I look at the Flyers now. I don't know if there's another team that's fired as many alumni as this organization has in the last year and a half. That would be something that Ed Snyder would just go crazy over, knowing something like that had happened to alumni. But it was difficult at first. And I realized that when and I told them, I had somebody, I had a couple weird things happen in broadcasting when I first started, and it was, didn't really change who I was, but I knew that when I was doing this, that the best job I could do was just to be myself, just to be who I was in the locker room, fudge it a little bit, no F words, watch your language, and just be who I was. And I that's who I was in the locker room. I'd said what was on my mind. I wasn't afraid to, and I've been, I know you're talking about, and I mean, guys come up, it's not his fault. It's no one's fault when someone else gets plucked up or fired. I don't hold any animosity towards him. I've had 5,000 texts or messages here like, what's going on? I don't have an answer for you. I don't know why things happen the way they do. And quite frankly, I don't care anymore. I did a little bit of coverage last year. Last season for the Flyers was such a dumpster fire that I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, when the mascot became the face of the franchise, like I watch that every night. I'm going, oh my God, like I'm living in an alternate reality. And the fans would feel it too, because that's what I mean. There's a certain demographic in Philadelphia that the fans want to see. We love the Philly fanatic, right? He's great. He drives around on the four-wheeler. We like all those kinds of things, but they cannot dominate the sporting event that you go to. And I think we saw that too many times last year, where they were looking for alternate things to make up for the lackluster production and what people were watching on the product itself on the ice. So I hope that changes this year. I'm back in it. I will be joining a podcast, as I said on Twitter last week on September 1st. I can't really say what that is yet. I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, I wanted to talk hockey last year to kind of mix the two things together, both recovery, which is my main thing now, getting my message out about Limitless. If you need help with mental health or addiction, call us. The second thing I wanted to do is not to just – there's a lot of people said, hey, buddy, we'd love to still hear what you got to say. So I always felt an obligation to some of the fans that did love listening to me after that kind of stuff. And I felt like I wanted to say it. So I'd gone out. I'd met with a few podcasts over the past year that had asked me if I had any interest. I felt like in a shortened year last year with me just getting going with the recovery business, that it would have been the wrong time to stay involved, especially with nobody in the building, to be doing everything on Zoom. I mean, if you're ever going to take a year off, if you're ever going to get canned, last year would have been probably the good year to have had that happen with two shortened seasons, a playoff in August, and a very dismal hockey season after the first 10 games for the Orange and Black last year. So I decided this year I'm going to get back in it as full as I can. Of course, I won't be doing anything on any kind of TV, but if I can get on once in a while and throw my views around after a hockey game or the next day, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it unfiltered. Awesome. You know, I think sometimes when I look back at doing the job, after you'd been there so long, you realize that I realized that I really wasn't getting paid to say the things I said. I was actually getting paid to not say the things that were really on my mind at times. So I think it's kind of funny in terms of how I toed that line. But, you know, I was always going to say what I thought about the game, and I was never going to try to put perfume on a pig and make it look like it was any better looking of a pig or smelt better when it was still just a pig. So, and that's maybe why I'm sitting here now, but that's who I am, and I'm glad I never changed for anybody.
Well, it's probably why you are and will be beloved in this city, because of your brutal honesty, and the way you articulate that is right on point. I mean, you're not offending anybody. You're calling it what it is. And that's great. So, I mean, now that you brought it up, you know, since we're discussing the offseason and last season, what are your thoughts on like the key transactions and the pieces they had to give up or the players they brought back? And in your opinion, are they in better shape now than they were prior to making the moves?
I don't know. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of like other hockey guys, let's just say players I've played with that are maybe now coaching in this league. And I've asked them and they're like, what did you guys do? I said, you're right. I don't like, what did the Flyers do? So again, if you looked at the moves they made in the offseason, I mean, you got rid of Patrick, who I don't know, maybe he'll be a player, but you can't wait around for 8 years trying to figure out if the guy's ever going to get his crap together, right? So he moves on. Phil Myers, to me, reminded me a little bit of his decision-making in his own zone. They're mistakes that I don't think he'll ever be able to repair. Like sometimes those guys in the zone, you could think your way out of it. He looked to me like one of those guys that was never going to be able to think the puck out of the zone and make a good, solid play on it. So, but again, you still traded two young guys for an aging defenseman that's had injuries. And Ellis. Do I like Ellis better? I do. I like him a lot better than Phil Myers. So, yes, that's an upgrade. The Gostisbehere one makes me absolutely sick to my stomach that they have to give away a pick just to get rid of him. I thought they were actually getting the second, and the sixth, or whatever it was. I'm like, wow. I had to reread it. I almost tweeted. I'm like, oh my God, this cannot be right. So that to me, I hate that move so much. And I hate the fact that the league has put themselves in that kind of light to do business like that is sickening. People were stunned by the Voracek move. Well, I'm as stunned in reverse about that move. Like, so they know from before that Jake hates the city of Columbus, right? Like, he's never been too shy to say how much he hated there. So they traded him back to Columbus for a guy who, by all standards, looks like a dream player. I feel like I'm missing something here almost. With the Atkinson for Voracek straight up, like, I'm not sure someone's like, can you believe the Flyers pulled that off? And I'm like, yeah, well, what's wrong with Atkinson? Is he all right?
Right.
It's weird to me.
Right.
We'll see. Again, I'm hoping that ends up being just a great move for Columbus because I like Jake Voracek. I did. When he was playing and engaged, he was a good player. Unfortunately, there's a lot of nights he wasn't as engaged, and I understand some of the Flyers fans, dropping it on Jake some nights, and that's the way he plays. He's an assist guy. He's a highly skilled player. Trying to think what else I'm missing here. I feel like I'm missing
Ristolainen.
Which one? Ristolainen. Okay, so I actually, when he came in the league, that's a funny one. So I've watched him come in right from the bench level, and I've never seen him get any better in the 6 years he's been in the league. He never got better once. They call him an analytics disaster.
Yes, we discussed that.
We still traded quite a bit to get him, like a lot to get him. So I'm always skeptical, like just to make change doesn't always sit well with me. And maybe that's why I'm not a general manager right now. But I think these are a lot of hope for moves. It's a lot of humongous change for the season. I don't like looking at it, but because I've been in that situation, I don't know what kind of a year poor Kevin Hayes is going to have, with what went to his brother, which is just so sad. Keith Yandel. I like Keith Yandel.
Thank you, Trevor.
Trevor. Yeah, I see that. Thank you, my friend. That's a good move, for 900, the veteran minimum, power play guy. Don't expect any miracles to develop in the defensive zone with Keith Yandel. But I do think he'll defend better than Ghost did. And I think that he will certainly help a guy like Cam York develop a lot better than a Shane Gostisbehere will. So I like that move as well. I do. Right. And then Ristolainen, one thing I do like about him, he competes hard. I'll give him that. He competes really hard. He may run 15 feet out of the way to try to compete, but he does compete hard, and I can't take that away from him.
Well, maybe being on the third line pairing could help him out versus being a top line defenseman.
He's not a top 4 guy to me.
Right.
On a championship type of team. He's a third pair depth guy that really, I think, unfortunately in Buffalo, they've thrust a lot of guys. Why are we talking about Buffalo again? But yeah, they thrust guys in there pretty quick, and before you know it, you can really ruin a young guy pretty quick if they're not seeing the puck actually in the offensive zone instead of playing defense the whole time in their own zone.
Yeah, Rasmus Dahlin's going to be right behind everybody else that's coming up that way.
Yeah. Got to be careful. You got to be really careful with young defensemen, goaltenders too. And which, let's talk about goaltenders. That'll be another one of the big questions this year for this team. All these moves are great. They're all. I like it. I like Ellis. I hope he stays healthy. I hope Ristolainen gets his game more. And I hope everything works out for this team this year. But none of it will, unless the goalie gets back to some form of greatness.
That's correct.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. I mean, and that's the one thing in this league, guys. It's pretty much never changed over the course of 100 years. You're only going to go so far in a playoff series, as far as when your goalie wants to take you that far. At the end of the day, it's true. The Flyers with Bernie Parent. I mean, it's nice they had rough teams, but any guy will tell you, from Bobby Orr to Bob Clark, Bernie Parent's the reason that they beat the Boston Bruins and carried the Flyers to those Stanley Cups. Certainly the first one against the Bruins. So again, it's a lot of pressure for a young goalie, but this is a kind of kid that has to rebound, or it could set the franchise back 5 to 7 years again if that's not the right answer in goal that they had him pegged. I tend to think he'll be back. I do. I have to believe he will. He's been too good in other games, guys, that I just think last year, from a goaltending standpoint, a young guy who's, very, very mentally into it, very mentally in check. It looked to me like a guy who just couldn't find a rhythm in a very, very odd year. That's what it looked like to me.
Well, throughout it's funny you referenced what a horrible dumpster fire year it was. We started our podcast during that dumpster fire year. So things will only look up for our show as well if they get better. So that you think of it, we had to discuss the same stuff ad nausea about what was. So that I'm going to build on what you just said. Mike, so we have 2 other guys that aren't with us today, and we've gone back and forth. It's defense's fault. They left them out to dry, but I've always been, save percentage guy. Confidence, maybe the defense, killed his confidence, but he let a lot of bad goals in as well. So is it the chicken or the egg? What's your ultimate thought on why he had a collapse last year?
I thought that there was games it looked to me like he got rattled early. And I think the other thing last year too, and I said this midseason, Ivan Provorov is not a number 1 defenseman.
We say it all the time on the show.
I mean, he's a good player. I mean, but he's not a number 1.
Let alone 19 minutes a game. Number 1 playing half the, just
guys, they're thrusting him into that. And you got broadcasters on there telling the fans every night the guy's Bobby Orr. No offense, JJ, but it's true. I mean, I sat and listened to it. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Well, he's a really nice player, but he's not Raymond Bourque. He's not. Yeah. And so the sooner that's why they're out. That's why they're out trying to. They ought to probably get 2 young guys away for Ryan Ellis to find stability in that top pair. They still don't have a number 1 defenseman. That's the fact of life. They do not have a number 1 defenseman here in Philadelphia. They got like 3 number 2s. I don't know if
Ellis can't be that guy, Chris. You don't think Ellis can be that guy?
No. I mean, I'd love to tell you yes, but no, I'd be lying if I did.
Okay.
He's a very good player. He is. He's been in Nashville. He's been to a Stanley Cup final. He's not a number one defenseman on any team in this league.
Can Cam York develop
again,
into that guy?
if you put the 2-2s, now listen, there's not a lot of teams. There's some other teams that don't have a number one defenseman either. There's a lot of them that don't have a true stud number one defenseman. Like there's only one Victor Hedman, right? Like actually, it's funny you say that. I just mentioned that name because I find Provorov to be a lot like Sergachev, but Sergachev is not. He's not their feature. He's a minute eater, but a guy that they don't rely on as much. In terms of the big minute stuff that Hedman gets. He's there, but that's what I think Provorov can be. He can be a minute eater. He's just not a top power play guy. And I think that they're going to have to get those minutes down. I'd like to see 3 minutes come off. I'd like to see him playing 21 minutes a night. I think you'll see a much better game.
Yeah, we brought up the Sergachev analogy. You're a smart man, Chris Therien, because we discussed the same thing on our show about he would fit better as a complimentary second pairing defenseman.
He is, and I'll tell you what, if you had that, you'd have one hell of a second pair.
Yeah.
So,
can Cam York develop into a number one?
I don't know yet. I don't know, guys. Like I've only seen him play a little bit. Again, there's small guys out there like defensemen with that offensive flair, like Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is good. Same with this, with young York. But again, you get in those deep playoff series where you need those trench defensemen in the corners in your D zone. I don't know if those are your guys. You still need that workhorse. That's why that David Savard gets traded to Tampa this year. Just gobbled up those dirty minutes, right? No one says anything about it, but you have to have one of those guys that does that, or two of them. You can't have those finesse defensemen back there eating and gobbling up big-time playoff minutes in the D zone the whole time. It's not feasible.
Real fast before Nick has a question, I just want your opinion because I threw this out a lot last year. It killed me when they signed and wasted money on Gustafsson. When they, in theory, now the guy might not have wanted to come here. Maybe he signed quickly, but I wanted Borowiecki on this team because he had grit. He's a team leader type, and I was just your thoughts on that because he signed for essentially the same money that Gustafsson signed for.
Yeah, I thought Gustafsson was absolutely horrible here.
Yeah,
as bad a defenseman as I've seen wear that uniform in a decade. I'm not kidding. It was that bad. And, he actually, to his credit, I'll give him credit, he actually played pretty well in the playoffs for Montreal. He did.
They have a great decor.
He did. He played within himself. He was good. He played in the power play. But his stint here in Philadelphia, and that happens sometimes, guys, where someone will come in and it just does not work. I think Chuck even said that. He's like, for whatever reason, it just didn't work with Eric. So, Borowiecki, yeah, I like Mark Borowiecki. He runs around a little bit, but if you want him, do you want him or do you want to risk the lane? And now what would it costed less to get Borowiecki? You wouldn't have to give away a first rounder for it. They're similar type of players. But I do like that Borowiecki kind of Gudis type of player in that sense. Gudis had a great year last year for Florida, which, they were raving about him down there. But you know what? It's again, you may want a guy, but that guy there may be 22 other teams that wants a guy too at a certain price, and he's going to have to pick one of them. And, it's one thing with Philadelphia. It's unfortunately with free agency. I remember this was the place before where any of the top free agents, you get nervous in the late 90s, early 2000s because you're saying to yourself, man, everybody wants to come to Philadelphia. That is not the case anymore with hockey. And so that's another interesting part. But there was a time when players would like their first call would be to Philadelphia. Ed Snyder had provided that kind of leadership that said, you know what, guys wanted to play hard for him. So they figured, may as well come over. We're going to have a chance to win a Stanley Cup or get deep in the playoffs every single spring. Why not?
Nick,
what are your thoughts on the coaching staff? Can AV be the guy that develops these younger players and gets them to the next level? And can he reinvigorate this team after what happened with this dumpster fire last year?
Well, I think he's going to have to. He's got a lot of pressure on him, right? Last year, no matter what you say, you could say it's a player's fault or, some guys had off years, but the coaches had bad years too. They did. This is supposed to be a world-class coach. I think one of the things too with AV, I think he'd tell you this. I like his demeanor. I like it a lot. He's also been a guy who's been very, very blessed to have had two great goaltenders in his coaching tenure in the NHL with Lundqvist and Luongo. And he had a great year the year before. Carter Hart also had a great year also, right? Heading in. So last year, the goaltender had a bad year, and it's kind of funny how the coach has a bad year when the goaltender ends up with a bad year. So, but I do think AV is a very, very quality coach. Quite frankly, he's going to need. This will be a very results-oriented season for the Flyers. There's not going to be any time to, which in itself could be a problem because you're trying to gel all these new people together and everything. But I don't think after coming out of this pandemic, the financial losses that a lot of these organizations have suffered, that in Philadelphia that there's going to be a grace period with this team. There's no way they can't afford it.
Yeah, I forgot who it was. We have a free agent coach sitting out there named Rick Tocchet that this town would love to see. If we don't want to see the Flyers get off to a bad start, but if they get off to a bad start, we're going to have another Hitchcock Laviolette type
start
firing.
You know what, you could. I mean, I think that I always look at a GM to see how long he keeps coaches around, but I think that Chuck's a guy that's had a lot of very few coaches in his career. I don't think he likes change. But that being said, this is Philadelphia, and it's not always just the general manager's assessment that counts at times. There's a lot of voices that come in across that, and this is going to be, no matter whether they believe it or not, this will be a very, very important year for this team. They have to make the playoffs, in my opinion, for the future of the franchise and where they're at right now, and for the message that they're trying to get out to the fans for the next 5 years. Because it's going to be your core. So here we are. Who are you going to be?
All right. So last question before we get to a little fun. Gun to your head. Carter Hart has a solid year. I'm not asking him to be a Vezina candidate, but he has a solid year. Do they make the playoffs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. I really do believe that. Yeah. He needs to have a good year. Very above average year. He needs to have an above 900 save percentage.
Yes,
it has to be above. If it's less than that, that's going to be tough. But it's going to come down. It's a fine line. It's not a lot of points. It's 3 or 4 losses here or there, right? Compared to 3 or 4 wins, and that gets you up over the hump of making the playoffs. It's one goal here or there. And they went backwards last year in terms of the goals that they were giving up. They cut that down the year before significantly, and last year it was just pathetic again. So. And usually when you have they had a couple games this past year that were fan killers, like that Ranger game, the 9-0.
Oh.
Those are ones that you could shut a fan base off for an entire year with one game like that.
It did. It shut them out for the rest of the year.
That was a fun post-game show, though.
They slammed the entire season, that one game on the orange and black all year. It was pathetic.
All right, so I'm going to get rid of the fancy schmancy. And you might want to put your glasses on, Chris, because I believe I had to squeeze some players. So this segment
between them there.
Yeah, you look good. You look good. So let me, Vance. I'm sorry. We have a guy named Vance as part of this team, and this is his job. And I'm sorry, Nick. Nick, what time is it?
It's time for the penalty box. You're right in there with them, Chris.
Yeah. Grow some hair. You'd be a Hansen brother. So this is a segment that we do each and every show where it's not today's hockey. It's yesteryear stuff. We talked about our favorite and worst jerseys. We did a great couple shows on draft redos. You mentioned the 90 draft, which no redos necessary for the Flyers, but we did some draft redos. And of course, I'm old school because I'm a big Broad Street Bullies guy. So we did favorite tough guys. So this show is going to be all about you to some extent. So I've pulled up here players of your era in categories, and I want you to pick one. You could pick all, you could pick 2, but pick one in each category and a little storytelling about each on the ice, off the ice, if you could. So the agitators of that era, you had Darcy Tucker, you had Sean Avery, and Matthew Barnaby. And of course, YouTube Chris Therien manhandling Barnaby all over the ice in that brawl with Buffalo. But Chris, what do you say about those 3 agitators? Is there one that jumps out?
Yeah, so I'm going to go Barnaby for sure. He was a quintessential type of like guy on the ice, never stopped barking. He had a Buffalo Sabres tattoos on his teeth. For some reason, a guy that was not, I was not out there getting paid to be a goon. I think I fought this guy 5 times in my life, but between the minors, exhibition games, and regular season. And that's a lot for me. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was Muhammad Ali of hockey. I was not. But he was pretty effective. He was a pain in the ass to play against. You would have loved to have had him on your team, I would imagine. But he was a pain in the ass to play against, and he didn't care who you were. You want to go to the next one too, right? Well, Marty Brodeur for goalies.
Okay.
I actually scored a regular season goal against Brodeur. It was a slap shot from the point with nobody in front of him and went up over his glove. It was Roger Nielsen's first game as coach. And I'm thinking, boy, that's an impression. How the hell did Brodeur not stop that? I wasn't going that hard. He was the reason I don't have a Stanley Cup, at least one. So I can safely say Marty Brodeur has deprived me and the core of the Flyers in the 90s of at least one Stanley Cup.
Did your teammates feel the same way? Like, were they like, oh, crap, Marty, or oh, crap, we have to face Dominik Hasek tonight?
It's funny with Marty. I never felt like we were getting into a situation with him where he was just so dynamic. But at the end of the day, the stats were there, right? Like you'd lose 3-2 or something, and you still got 2 on him, and you're like, you got 2, but you never got more than 2. And he had the ability to make that crazy save at the most important time of the hockey game, right? So and that's goaltending, at the end, like in a playoff game, he makes a big save that someone else didn't make, and that ends up being the difference. To me, he's the best goalie I think of all time. But that might be your top 2 out of your top 3. I'm actually going to put Bernie in your top 3 goalies of all time. I am. With Waugh and Brodeur. Hasek was a hell of a goalie. It reminded me of Roman Cechmanek when I look at the other ones. And Patrick Waugh is just a stone-cold winner. Anybody that ever played with them, there's some great stories. Murray told John LeClaire and his team in Montreal against LA, he said, guys, take as long as you need to score the goal in overtime because they could play all night. They won't beat me. So you guys go out and have fun. What a thing to hear from your goalie in a Stanley Cup final game. Top defenseman, that's Raymond Bourque right there, right? I'm just trying to get in on a little
Bourque,
bit.
Leach, and Lidstrom.
Yeah, so Leach would be at the bottom of that for those 3 for me. Lidstrom to me is the best defenseman ever to play the game. He's taking over from Bobby Orr. Okay. He was the reason they beat us in '97. They matched him and Nicholas Lidstrom and Larry Murphy against Lindros and LeClaire, and they never touched them once the whole series. They dominated the Lindros line, those 2 defensemen, and that was the end of our finals in '97. Raymond Bourque was a world-class player long before I was in the league. He dominated the '80s as well. He was one of the few guys I could actually say when I look at Bourque, like where I looked across at Worms, I see the Gretzky jersey behind one of you guys, next to the Clark one behind you.
Yeah, that was behind me.
Holy shit, I'm going to play Ray Bourque tonight. Like, to me, that was just so cool. Same with Gretzky and warm-ups. But those 3 guys. And Leach was another guy, a terrific defenseman. I never felt Leach was really a paramount player when we saw him. He was great, but he never drew the likeness to me like Nicholas Lidstrom did, who was just tremendous. And the goal scorer is there at the bottom.
You have to discuss before. I hate to interrupt, but you have to discuss why you so dominated Jágr when you defended him. What did you just get juiced to play him?
I did, and I had it was probably my second year in the league. It was a Sunday afternoon game on Fox, and I got out against them. It was funny. I wasn't supposed to be on the ice against them. They had another matchup. And I remember running them and like early. I'm like, oh, good, got a nice shot on Jágr there, soften him up early, and it was Terry Murray, and I remember Terry said, leave him on Jágr, just leave it for a little bit.
Nice.
And he comes down again, and I pound him again, and again, and again. Now I realize we're in the 3rd period. He doesn't have any points. I don't even know if he's got a shot on goal. He gets so mad in the first, he punches me in the head, and I just start laughing at him, and the whole building goes crazy. We're in Philadelphia. So, and this went on. This went on, guys, for 40 games in my life. And I still was saying, was he going to get me tonight? He would come out on Sundays, right? And he knew, like, most guys would be gambling on football or whatever. Like, the whole league was. And I remember he lined up at like 10 after 1. It was a 1 o'clock start on Sunday, NFL Sunday, and he comes up. He starts calling me Bundy. He goes, hey, Bundy, who do you like today? And I go, F you. I said, you're going to have the longest afternoon ever. Don't try to be my friend. And so, and I didn't say it like that either. It was way worse. I hit him, and then I remember Dan McGillis about 8 minutes later ran him, and he left the game, never came back on the ice again. That was it. But I just, for some reason, you talk about having a guy's number. I had his number. And I mean, we got the playoff series where I remember someone went to Mark Recchi, like, this is going to be a big, I think it was 2000. And he says, he goes, I'm not too worried. We got Bundy. He'll handle Yager. And he was dead serious. And I'm like, holy gee, that's a lot of pressure. But he was serious. Like, he goes, I'm not worried about him. Bundy takes care of him every time we play him. And he said it in the paper. And I'm like, wow, like this got to a whole new level of, like, is it a fluke? I started to wonder if it was becoming a fluke. I'm not lying. Like, I'm handling this guy like he's.
You got in his head.
Yeah, I did, and I owned him in his career. And you know what? And he said as much. People asked him who's the hardest guy. He said it was me. When he played here, we kind of became friends. We talked about it a little bit. But it was actually funny. One night he was right in front of me in the anthem one night. I'm gonna finish with this story, but he said. I was behind him on the Flyers bench. I was between the benches, and I said to him, he was doing the anthem. I looked over. I go, "You're so lucky I'm not in the lineup tonight." And I could just see him starting to chuckle a little bit behind the bench. And he was laughing. So, but anyway, he ended up being a good guy, and God bless him. He's going to be 50 in the new year, and he's still going strong. And I think it's a great hockey story, and he's been a terrific. He's been a terrific player for the game of hockey in general, and I salute Jaromir Jagr for his career and for what he continues to do. It really is impressive.
Now I'll close with this question, and when we wrap up the show, Chris, I forgot to say, don't jump off. Sometimes when I do a close, the guest just clicks off and said we want to say a few things afterwards. So just hold on, please. So the top goals, these three were the leading goal scorers of the '90s in goals. So the reason I want to address Shanahan is because he was a complete player. I mean, so what was it like facing a rugged guy that, when the puck's going in the corner, you're like, crap, Shanahan's coming. Simultaneous to me getting the puck. Like, what was your thought process when you had a big dude coming your way?
I played a lot against Shanahan. He's another guy. I mean, you go in the corner, you got to get ready to get hit. You got to be ready to be physical. I remember in the series and the finals, I remember being very physical with him. I never had an issue. I mean, I'm a big guy too, so he understood that. But there are guys that'll just give you a little bit more grinding. A guy like Brett Hull. So my 3 on that list, getting to it, would be Brett Hull. I didn't play him as much because he was in the West, but he was one of those guys. The problem with Brett Hull is he got that, in a lot like Shanahan too, but he got rid of that puck so quick off his stick, and that's what made him so dangerous. You can be the best defense in the world to position yourself, whether your skates are there or the best position to block a shot or get a stick on it. But he got rid of it so quick with those hands that it sometimes didn't matter. And that's why it was so difficult for goaltenders to pick up how he shot. He had this great snapshot that was a lot like other guys' slap shots. So I'm going to put Brett Hull at the top of that list. Shanahan probably a pretty darn close second in terms of that release.
Well, that wraps up the penalty box segment, and it ultimately wraps up our show. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed Chris Therien, unfiltered, as it were. I can't wait when the book comes out. I can't wait to listen to you on your podcast. Listen, there's no competition. We will share your podcast on all our sites as well. Thank you for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, please go to Heat Ratio Sports on YouTube, subscribe. We are on literally all socials. Go to our handle at Flyer and Ice Pod, click on the Linktree link, and you can find us on any streaming mechanism out there, whether you watch it, iTunes, Spotify, any streaming thing, you can watch a show or listen to our show. So on behalf of Nick Tossi, Chris Therien, I'm Dan Green. We will see you soon. Jason Martinez will be coming in the near future. So again, good hockey, everyone. We look forward to the start of the season. Take care.